Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Yevamot, pages 104 through 110, Kuf Daled through Kuf Yud, 104. Chaltza v'rakeka avalo kara chalitzata keshera. If a Yavama did the chalitza ceremony together with her Yavam, whereby she did the removal of the shoe and the act of spitting in his direction, but did not do the required readings, the recitations of the scriptural lines, then the chalitza is still kosher. If she did the reading and the spitting but not the shoe removal, then it's invalid. What if she did the removal of the shoe and the recitation but not the spitting? Rabbi Elazar Omer chalitzata pesula. Rabbi Akiva Omer chalitzata keshera. Elazar says it's no good. Akiva says it's good. So what do we see here? There's a hierarchy of the importance of the various aspects of the chalitza ceremony. Highest on the list, of absolute essential, is the shoe removal. Least important, and essentially can be dispensed with it if it happens, post facto, is the scriptural reading. The middle level is the spitting. According to one opinion, it's essential. According to the other, it's not essential. Kuf Hey, 105. Tanu Rabbanan, Mishpacha Chatayta b'Yerushalayim, Shayu Meitim Keven 18 Shana. There was a family in Jerusalem where the boys were dying at the age of 18. So a terrible thing was happening. They were not living long lives. They were dying very young. Ba'u with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So they told Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, listen, this is what's happening to our family. Our boys are dying young. What can we do to change the situation for the better? So he says, well, maybe you're the descendants of Eli the high priest of the days of the Shoftim, where there was a punishment imposed, a divine punishment that the family would die young. So the solution is, just in case you're from the Eli family, go study Torah, and that will lengthen the lives of the individual menfolk in your family. They went and they followed Rabbi Yochanan's advice. And they lived. They studied Torah and they lived. So they would call the family of Yochanan, named after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who had given them advice of how to lengthen their days. Kuf Vav, 106. Mitzvat chalitza bahi v'yevim tov betin. So in order to properly do the mitzvah of chalitza, the man and the woman, the Yavam and the Yavama, will come to the court. And they will give him good advice, suitable advice. Now this is an important concept in the Torah of lifnei iver lo titen michshol. You're not supposed to put a stumbling block before the blind. That if you give advice, it has to be good advice and not deliberately bad advice. Well, what potentially good advice is there to give to a Yavam and a Yavama at the doorstep of a levirate marriage? The answer is kalach etzel shekemotcha v'tachnis katatal toch beitecha. They tell the man, do not take someone for a wife who's very different from you in whether age or temperament, whatever the factor might be. If you're worlds apart, then this is not a good idea. Don't bring strife into your home. So the most significant factor was age difference, that it was possible for a man to be much older than his younger brother who died, and that brother might have been older than his wife, and so there could be a 20-25 year age gap between these people. It's not a good idea for them to get married, and the Beit Din will tell them, Yibum is not a good idea, Chalitza is the better option. Kuf Zayin. Beit Shammai Omrim, so the Mishnah here is talking about miyun, where a girl who was orphaned, so her father died, and her mother or her older brothers married her off in a marriage which under Torah law has no standing, but under rabbinic law is recognized. And the rule is that the girl is allowed to refuse the husband at some point along the way, in advance of turning to the age of majority, if she doesn't want to stay in this marriage. So the question is, under what conditions can this meyun be done? Beit Shammai says only after erusin, but not after nisuin, because then the marriage has been consummated, it's a full marriage, there's no turning back. Whereas Beit Hillel says, no, even after nisuin, it can be undone by meyun. Beit Shammai says only the husband can be refused, whereas Beit Hillel says not only the husband can be refused, but if the husband were to die and they were childless and he had a brother and then now there's a Yavam, the Yavam could also be refused. Beit Shammai says the minyan has to take place in the physical presence of the husband, whereas Beit Hillel says no, he doesn't have to be there. It could be even not in his presence. Beit Shammai says it has to be in the presence of a court, whereas Beit Hillel says no, the court is not necessary. It could be done anywhere. Kufchet. Hama'enet ba'ish. Hu mutar b'krovotea. V'imuteret b'krovav. V'lo pasla min ha'kuna. If a woman, a young girl, were to refuse her rabbinically married husband, then there's no marriage. In which case, he can marry her relatives, she can marry his relatives, because there's no connection anymore. And she has not been invalidated from marrying a Kohen because she's not a divorcee, because there never was a marriage, so there was no divorce. Not on la get, however, if he gave her a divorce, a get, then hu asher b'krovotea, he's forbidden to her relatives, she's forbidden to his relative, upasla min hakuna, and she cannot marry a Kohen because she now has the status of a grusha, of a divorcee. 109. Lo lemidabek adam b'shlosha dvarim. A person should always cling to three things, v'trachek b'shlosha dvarim, and stay away from three other things. What are the three things you should get close to? Yidbakbo. B'chalitza. Chalitza, meaning, stick to chalitza, don't do yibum. The yibum is not a good idea, generally speaking. Better to do a chalitza. Secondly, havad shalom, bringing peace between people. Prefer that over the alternative. Hafarat nedarim, and the nullifying of vows. That a man can nullify the vows of his wife or daughter, he should do so, rather than allow them to stand. And what three things should be distanced from? It's better not to refuse that rabbinical marriage which was contracted between the young girl, the orphan girl, by her mother or older brothers with this would-be husband. Better not to do the meyun. Umin hapikdonos, umin haravonos, and don't be a person who watches over items as a bailey, and do not take arvonot. Do not be a guarantor on someone else's debts. Kuf Yud 110. What happens if a man was married to two orphaned girls? So this was rabbinical marriage with two different orphan girls, and he died. So if one of these two girls were to have a yibum or a chalitza with the dead guy's brother, then the other one, who did not have the ceremony done for her, would be free to go, be exempt. She's now can marry anybody. And similarly, if these were two deaf-mute girls. Now, what's the point here? It's a rabbinical marriage, and one needs a yibum chalitza, the other can go free, as it will be under Torah law. And so too with the chershot deaf-mutes, because that's also only rabbinical marriage, similar to what it would have been under Torah law. However, ketana v'chereshet, if one was a minor, one of these wives was a minor, and one was a deaf-mute, so they're both rabbinical marriages, but of a different style, different type of rabbinical marriage, and then the yibum or chalitza for one of them will not exempt the other. Since they're different styles and different types of rabbinic marriage, each one requires her own yibum or chalitza in order to go free to marry anyone she would want. Everyone have a great week.